The first thing Rome stole wasn't the crown.
It was the future.
Picture this, a princess who grew up memorizing poems, learning diplomacy, planning a marriage that would unite kingdoms. Suddenly standing in the dirt outside a Roman camp with rope cutting into her wrists.
Not because she fought. Not because she sinned.
But because her last name meant something. Inside the camp, nobody calls her by her name anymore. They call her property. And the terrifying part is how ordinary it feels to them. Because Roman generals didn't just win wars. They managed messages. Every captive was a sentence Rome wanted the world to read. A defeated king could be executed. Quick.
Clean.
Almost merciful. But a daughter of that king? A princess whose bloodline could restart a rebellion? Rome had a different plan.
Not always death.
Sometimes something colder, public erasure. They would strip her identity in layers. One layer at a time.
First, isolation. Then humiliation.
Then a role in a ritual designed to tell every enemy watching. This is what happens when you resist. And here's the twist nobody expects. For some princesses, the worst moment wasn't the chains, it was the offer. Because a Roman commander might lean in and say, almost politely, "You want your sister to live? Then give me something worth more than your dignity." And in that moment, the princess realizes the trap. Rome doesn't just conquer land. Rome turns love into leverage. So what did Roman victory actually mean for royal daughters? When the cheering ended, when the parade was over, when the historians stopped writing. In the next part, I'll show you the 3 fates Roman generals used most often, each one designed to destroy a dynasty without creating a martyr, and why one of them was considered merciful only because it was slower. Rome didn't just capture princesses, it reclassified them. One day, she's a diplomatic asset, someone whose marriage could move borders. The next, she's a tool in a Roman general's plan to make an entire region stop dreaming of rebellion. And Rome had a menu of outcomes. Not officially written down,
but understood. Fate number 1, the triumph.
If you were royal, Rome liked you visible.
Not hidden.
They marched you through the city like living proof that your bloodline had been solved. Chains that forced short steps. Guards close enough to steer your body like an animal. Crowds screaming names they didn't even understand, because the point wasn't accuracy.
It was dominance.
And here's the part historians sanitize, the triumph wasn't a parade. It was a psychological execution carried out in daylight. 1 million witnesses trained to enjoy your humiliation. But that was only the beginning, because the triumph answered one question. Did Rome win? It didn't answer the more dangerous one. Can her family rise again? So Rome had 2 quieter fates that often came after. Fate number 2, the household. A princess could be assigned to a powerful Roman home. On paper, that sounds like survival.
Soft beds. Clean water. A roof.
But your name becomes decorative. Your choices disappear. You're kept close because you're valuable, languages, etiquette, connections. And because Rome prefers threats where it can watch them breathe. Then there's the one that was kind, only because it looked peaceful. Fate number 3, the political marriage.
Not a love story. A lock.
Rome could place a royal daughter into a new arrangement that snapped her old identity in half. A living seal on Rome's paperwork. A way to end a dynasty without spilling more blood. And every single one of these fates shared one brutal rule. The princess wasn't being punished for what she did. She was being punished for what she could become. Now zoom back into the moment that breaks people. A Roman commander offering a deal. Not confess and live. Not obey and I'll spare you. Something worse, because it forces her to choose who suffers. He doesn't need her dead. He needs her useful. And usefulness is just another kind of chain. In the next part, we're going inside that deal, how Roman commanders used bargains to turn family love into a weapon, and the one type of information a princess could offer that made even a brutal general pause. The most terrifying sound in a Roman camp wasn't screaming. It was a calm voice saying, "Make me an offer." Because that's how Rome made cruelty feel reasonable. Not rage. Not madness.
Administration.
A princess would be dragged in front of a commander, dust on her face, rope marks on her skin, eyes still trying to act royal even as the world collapses around her. And the general wouldn't shout.
He'd do something worse. He'd negotiate.
Your father's dead either way. Your kingdom is already mine. So tell me, why should your sister live? And here's the trap, whatever she says becomes the story of her life. If she begs, she proves weakness. If she stays silent, she proves she's useless. If she offers money, Rome takes it and still keeps the leverage. So what could a captured royal daughter offer that Rome actually valued?
Not gold.
Rome could extract gold from the ruins.
Not tears.
Rome was bored of tears.
She could offer maps, supply routes, hidden caches, mountain passes,
River crossings. Names of rival nobles. Secrets of alliances. Which cities would open their gates, and which would burn. That's the currency that turns a captive into an asset. And once she becomes an asset, the violence changes shape.
It gets cleaner, slower, more controlled.
Not because Rome becomes merciful, because Rome becomes strategic. She is moved from the edge of the camp into the center.
From the stable to the tent.
From the soldier's laughter to an officer's paperwork. And that might sound like she's being saved, until you realize what's really happening. Rome isn't sparing her. Rome is investing in her. Because an invested captive has a job. To keep producing value while watching her family hang in the balance.
And if she stops producing?
If the map is wrong? If the names don't lead anywhere? Then she learns the other Roman rule no one says out loud. The deal was never protection.
The deal was postponement.
Now let's raise the pressure. Imagine her younger sister in another tent, alive for now, because of the promise. Imagine the princess staring at a Roman officer who seems different.
Not kinder. Just smarter.
The kind of man who understands that terror is useful only when it's aimed correctly. He doesn't ask, how do we punish her? He asks, how do we keep her cooperative? And suddenly the princess realizes something electrifying. If she can bind this man's ambition to her sister's survival, she might create the only shield she'll ever get inside Rome.
But ambition has a price.
And the price is usually paid in public. In the next part, we hit the moment Roman commanders loved most, the ceremony.
The staged submission.
The performance designed to break a princess without spilling a drop of blood, because the army needed to see her bend. Rome didn't always need to hurt you in private. Sometimes it hurt you in front of everyone, and called it order. A princess could survive chains. She could survive hunger. But the ceremony, this was designed to rewrite her in the minds of thousands. They'd assemble the camp at dawn. Standards up.
Armor polished.
Not because it mattered, but because the image mattered. And she'd be brought out wearing something intentionally plain, intentionally humiliating. A visual message that her royal life had been stripped down to a single function: surrender. The general would step forward like a judge. He'd say her name loudly, so the soldiers could enjoy the taste of it. Then he'd list everything she'd lost.
Kingdom. Father. Brothers. Future. And then he'd make her speak.
Not her own words, Rome's words.
A script of submission.
Because Rome didn't just conquer bodies. It conquered narratives. So she'd repeat lines that felt like swallowing glass. I have no authority. My life continues at Rome's pleasure. My family survives by Rome's mercy. And when she finishes, the general isn't satisfied yet, because humiliation is more believable when it has a physical gesture attached to it.
Kneel. Lower. Closer.
The soldiers watch like they're witnessing a lesson, because they are. This is a training video for empire. And somewhere at the edge of the formation, her sisters are forced to witness it. Not because Rome enjoys their pain, but because Rome wants to teach them something poisonous. Your love can be used against you. When it's over, the general looks generous. He can say, I spared them. He can pretend he's civilized. But the princess understands the truth. This wasn't mercy. This was branding. Now the camp has a story to tell. A story that will travel faster than the army does. The daughters of that king crawled. And when stories like that spread, rebellions die before they start. But the ceremony is also a doorway. Because once she's publicly broken, she can be transported, moved like cargo, into the next stage of Rome's machine. And that next stage is where the empire gets loud. Because Rome didn't want captives hidden away. Rome wanted them displayed. So if you were a royal daughter, the question wasn't, will they take you to Rome? It was, what will Rome do with you once the city can see you? In the next part, we're stepping into the triumph itself, why the procession was a weapon, what the crowd did to royal captives, and the single moment that could turn a public humiliation into a public catastrophe. Rome didn't celebrate victory quietly. It made victory walk. The triumph wasn't a parade. It was a moving stage designed to burn one idea into the world. Rome owns the outcome. They bring out the loot first, gold, weapons, statues ripped from temples, so the crowd is already cheering before the captives appear.
That's on purpose.
The city is warmed up, hungry, loud. Then the royal family shows. And if you're the daughter of a defeated king, you feel it instantly. A million eyes trying to decide what you deserve. You're in chains that force you to shuffle. Not because Rome can't restrain you another way, but because Rome wants you to look small. And the crowd, drunk, ecstatic, cruel in that anonymous way crowds become, starts throwing whatever they can grab.
Rotten food. Mud.
Stones if the guards miss them. The insults are worse than the objects. Because the crowd doesn't just want you humiliated. It wants you transformed into entertainment. This is where many princesses broke, not in a dungeon, but in daylight. Not because they were weak, because they were human. And there's a moment, every time, where the empire's power feels total.
A captive stumbles. Just one step wrong.
One chain catches a foot.
One knee hits stone.
The crowd surges, laughing, screaming, demanding more. Rome calls it order, but you can feel how close it is to a riot.
A triumph is controlled chaos.
And if a royal captive panics, if she fights the chain, if she screams at the wrong time, it becomes a story Rome can't edit. So the sisters learn a terrifying skill, disappearing inside themselves while their bodies keep moving. But sometimes, love interrupts strategy. A younger sister collapses. And the older one, the one who's been bargaining and calculating and surviving, turns back.
Not because it's smart.
Because she can't watch her sister die on stone while the empire laughs. She reaches down, even with chains cutting into her wrists. She pulls her sister up. And for a split second, the crowd sees something Rome never wanted displayed.
Not defeat. Defiance.
Not the defiance of armies, something smaller and more dangerous. The defiance of family refusing to break apart. That's when the guards move in. Because the triumph must keep flowing. The general must not lose the rhythm of victory. And the princess understands the next truth. Rome will tolerate your survival. It will even tolerate your usefulness. But it will not tolerate you controlling the emotional story. So after the triumph, Rome does what it always does when it sees a spark.
It puts it in a jar.
In the next part, we follow what happens after the cheering ends, where royal daughters were kept, how Rome decided whether they lived comfortably, lived as hostages or vanished, and the one factor that could quietly turn a kept captive into a political player. The most dangerous part of Rome wasn't the arena.
It was the house.
After the triumph, the crowd goes home.
The streets empty. The music stops.
And that's when the princess learns what Rome really wants from her.
Not her death. Her placement.
Because Rome had a talent for turning people into furniture. Royal daughters were often kept as hostages inside elite households. Not always chained, not always starving, sometimes even dressed well. And that's what makes it sinister. Comfort becomes another kind of control. A senator hosts her at dinner like an exotic symbol. A general's wife shows her off like proof of victory. Guests ask her to speak Greek, to recite poetry, to tell them what the East is like, while never asking what she lost. And she smiles, because she understands the rules now.
If she's pleasant, she gets food.
If she's useful, she gets protection. If she's valuable, her sisters stay alive. But value is a knife with two edges. Because the moment she becomes important to Roman politics, she becomes a prize in Roman politics. She hears names whispered in the atrium. She sees messengers arrive with sealed tablets. She notices who visits her owner late at night. And slowly, the princess realizes something terrifying. Rome is not one monster. Rome is a room full of monsters competing. And competition creates gaps. If one faction wants her dead, another might want her alive. If one man wants to discard her, another might keep her as leverage. Her survival becomes a political tug-of-war, and that tug-of-war can be used. So she starts doing what she was raised to do as a princess.
She studies the court. Who hates whom? Who needs what?
Who is terrified of scandal? Who is desperate for a win? And she learns the most Roman truth of all. In Rome, morality is negotiable. But utility is sacred. So she makes herself indispensable. She translates letters. She explains foreign protocol.
She draws maps.
She advises on alliances. She becomes the quiet mind behind decisions made by men who publicly pretend she's nothing. And while Rome thinks it's using her, she begins using Rome. Not to take back her kingdom, she's not naive. But to do something more personal, more urgent. To secure her sisters into lives where they can't be snatched back on a whim. That's the real climax most people never hear about.
Not the chains. Not the parade.
The chess match inside marble walls. Because if she can get one sister adopted into a Roman family, legal protection, status, citizenship, then that sister becomes untouchable in a way captives never are. And if she can get the other sister attached to patronage, paid, famous, valuable, then harm becomes inconvenient. And inconvenience is the closest thing Rome has to mercy.
But here's the cliff edge.
Every year she survives, she becomes more skilled. Every skill she gains binds her deeper into the empire that destroyed her. So what's the end game? Does she ever truly escape, or does Rome simply reshape her into a Roman tool with a foreign face? In the next part, we reach the final twist: how some captive princesses managed to turn hostage status into power, and what it cost them internally to win that kind of victory. Here's the cruelest paradox. The more a captive princess wins in Rome, the more Rome owns the definition of her life. Because there are two kinds of survival. One is staying alive. The other is staying yourself. And Rome was brilliant at letting you keep the first while slowly erasing the second. If she plays the game well, she can bargain her sisters into safety. One sister protected by a powerful household, legally wrapped in Roman status. The other protected by patronage, paid performances, reputation, connections that make her expensive to harm. From the outside, it looks like a miracle.
A happy ending.
But inside the princess, something fractures. Because every yes she says to Rome buys time and safety. And costs her another piece of the person she used to be.
New name. New clothes.
New language at the dinner table. New laughter at jokes made about her homeland. New rules about when she can speak, when she must stay silent, when she must smile. And one day she realizes. Rome didn't need to execute her dynasty. It simply absorbed it. The bloodline didn't continue as a threat. It continued as a footnote inside Roman family trees, Roman patronage networks, Roman history books written by Romans. So the princess makes one final move.
Not rebellion.
Not escape into the wilderness.
A Roman move.
She leverages everything: her intelligence, her reputation, the faction that benefits from her, the senator who owes her, the rival who fears her secrets. And she asks for the one thing Rome hates giving because it sets precedent.
Legal freedom.
Not "I won't be whipped." Not "I'll be treated well."
Freedom on paper. In law.
In Rome's own language. Because a freed woman can own property.
A freed woman can make contracts.
A freed woman can choose where she lives. A freed woman can't be casually traded like a trophy when politics shift. And if Rome grants it, it's not because Rome suddenly becomes good. It's because the princess has become inconvenient to keep captive. That's the real end of the story. Rome does not release her out of compassion. Rome releases her when holding her becomes more expensive than freeing her. So what was worse than death? It wasn't one single punishment.
It was the system.
A world where royal daughters were treated as political instruments. Where mercy meant being displayed, placed, reshaped. Where survival required learning the language of the people who destroyed your home. Where love became leverage, and dignity became a currency you spent to keep someone else breathing. And the reason we don't hear these stories clearly is simple. The people who wrote surviving histories were usually Roman men, writing about Roman glory. They recorded battles,
speeches, triumphs.
They did not linger on what it took to break a family line without creating martyrs. But if you read between the lines, hostages, adoptions, household placements, honors given to captives,
you can see it.
A clean, legal-looking machine built to do something filthy. Turn living people into proof. So when you hear Rome conquered, don't just picture legions and standards. Picture the daughters of defeated kings. Not as side characters, but as the final battlefield where Rome proved it could conquer the future. If you've made it this far, I want you to notice something. Rome's violence wasn't always loud. It was often bureaucratic. A defeated king gets remembered because his death is easy to summarize: executed, poisoned, killed in battle. But a daughter of that king? Her fate is harder to write in one clean line, because it wasn't a moment.
It was a process.
Step 1. Make her visible enough to warn everyone. Step 2. Make her useful enough to keep. Step 3. Make her ordinary enough that history stops paying attention. That's how empires erase people without leaving blood on the page. And that's why so many accounts trail off into silence after the triumph. The texts don't say, "Then they destroyed her." They say nothing, because what happened next looked like domestic life, legal status changes, placement, protection, and the slow conversion of a human being into an imperial asset. Here's what I want you to take away. Worse than death wasn't always torture. It was the deliberate stripping of identity. The transformation of a royal daughter into a symbol, then into a hostage, then into a tool.
And the darkest part?
Rome could make that look like mercy.
A room instead of a cell.
Food instead of hunger. A patron instead of a soldier. A new name instead of the old one. But if the price of breathing is surrendering every right to be yourself,
what do you call that?
Now, one last twist that should bother you. The princess who survived didn't survive because Rome spared her. She survived because she learned Rome's rules faster than Rome expected. She treated every day like a negotiation. Every smile like a shield. Every conversation like reconnaissance. And she saved her sisters not by overpowering the empire, but by turning the empire's greed, ambition, and factional politics against itself. That's not a fairy tale. That's a hostage learning to play chess with people who think they're playing checkers. So when you see statues of Roman generals, when you hear the speeches about civilization, remember what that civilization was built to do.
Win wars.
And then make the defeated teach everyone else how not to resist. If you want more stories where history goes quiet on purpose, where the most important human suffering was edited out, subscribe. And tell me in the comments, did you know Rome used humiliation and hostage politics like this, or did you only ever hear about the battles? Because the next time someone says, Rome was glorious, I want you to hear the missing line. Rome was glorious for the winners. For the daughters of defeated kings. Rome was the war that didn't end. Before you click away, let's expose the clean lie. People love to say, that was ancient history. Different morals. Different world. But Rome wasn't different in the way people mean. Rome understood something modern dictators still understand. If you want to control a population, you don't just punish soldiers.
You punish symbols.
And the daughters of defeated kings were symbols you could weaponize in 3 directions at once. Against the defeated people, look what your leaders brought you. Against neighboring kingdoms, think twice before you ally against us. For Roman soldiers and citizens, you are the empire. This is your reward. That's why the punishment wasn't just death.
Death ends the story.
Rome preferred a story that kept walking. A princess alive in Rome, publicly conquered, privately managed, was a long-term billboard for power. And here's the last uncomfortable truth.
The system worked.
Rebellions didn't only die because legions were strong. They died because Rome made the cost of resistance feel personal, generational, intimate. Not we'll burn your city. But we'll take your future and make it ours. So when historians focus only on tactics and battles, you're missing half the machine. The other half was social engineering, hostages, public rituals, family line manipulation, and deliberate humiliation. And if you're wondering, is there proof Rome did this kind of hostage handling? Yes, hostage-taking and the use of elite captives in triumphs and households is well attested in ancient sources, though those sources often minimize the captives' inner lives. For example, ancient writers describe triumphs and the display of high-status captives, as well as the political value of hostages in Roman diplomacy. Sources include Plutarch's biographies and Livy's histories, which discuss triumphs, captives, and Roman statecraft around hostages and defeated elites. These are broad references, individual cases vary. Plutarch, Life of Aemilius Paulus, on the Macedonian defeat and aftermath, Livy of Urbe Condita, multiple books on wars and diplomacy. The point of this video isn't to pretend every case looked identical. It's to show the pattern, how an empire could turn a royal daughter into a message. So if this story made you angry, good. That anger means you can still see what propaganda tries to hide. And if it made you quiet, that's the real effect of reading between the lines of conquest. Because once you understand what victory meant for people who didn't have swords in their hands, you stop romanticizing empires. You start asking better questions. Now let's land this where it matters, right on your chest. If Rome wanted to kill you, it could. That wasn't the flex. The flex was making you live in a way that proved you'd been defeated. That's what worse than death really meant in the Roman imperial playbook. A life engineered to serve as evidence. Evidence that your father failed. Evidence that your people were powerless. Evidence that the future now belonged to someone else. And the darkest trick is how normal it could look from the outside. A captive princess walking through a courtyard instead of a cage. Eating at a table instead of starving.
Speaking fluent Latin.
Wearing Roman fashion. Laughing at a dinner party because she's learned that laughter is armor. Anyone watching could say, see? Rome civilized her. But she would know the truth.
They didn't civilize her. They repurposed her.
Because every privilege could be revoked. Every protection depended on staying useful. Every relationship was filtered through power. And when you live like that long enough, you start to fear a specific moment.
Not punishment. Irrelevance.
Because the day Rome no longer needs you is the day the story can end however Rome chooses. So if you want a final image to remember, don't picture the battlefield. Picture a woman sitting in a beautiful Roman house, perfectly composed, and realizing that her survival has been so expensive, it has become its own kind of captivity. Then picture her sisters, alive, grown, protected, because she played the only game available. Not a victory you'd put on a monument. A victory you'd never wish on anyone. That's why the daughters of defeated kings disappear from the records. Not because nothing happened. Because what happened was designed to look like nothing. If you've ever wondered how empires keep people conquered long after the war ends, this is one answer. And if you want more hidden history breakdowns like this, where we pull the camera away from the generals and put it on the people they erased, then subscribe, because the next story is even more shocking once you realize how often history repeats this pattern under different flags.